In 1962, Clarence Pennington could walk into any room on Auburn Avenue and make every person in it trust him before he spoke. He was not rich. He had a code. He was not rare. In every black neighborhood with a barbershop, you found men like him. What they knew went quiet. We are turning the sound back up. Hit subscribe. These are 20 things they did that earned trust. Before we start, hold 3 numbers in your mind. Number 13 sounds like the worst advice a young man could get today. In a world that tells you to be loud, to take up space, to make yourself heard, this rule says the opposite, and the man who followed it won every room he walked into. Number 3 will cost you something just to hear it. And number 1, the plainest rule on this whole list, the one Clarence Pennington lived by above every other, is where this countdown ends. Let us begin. Number 20, press your clothes. The iron was hot before dawn. Roosevelt Macklin set the crease in his trousers while the rest of Mechanicsville was still sleeping. He owned 2 pairs. Both looked like tin. A man who pressed his own clothes was telling the world something before he stepped off the porch, that he had taken time with himself, that he had decided how he would be seen, and that the decision began before anyone was watching. Roosevelt Macklin did not dress for compliments. He dressed because a pressed shirt was a promise he made to himself every morning. Number 19, walk on the curbside. Otis Gaines never let a woman walk on the street side of the sidewalk. It did not matter if she was his wife, his neighbor, or a woman from church he barely knew. He shifted to the outside without a word, without looking down, without making a show of it. His body was between her and whatever the street might bring. She noticed. She always noticed. A man who put himself between a woman and the road was telling her, without speaking, that her safety was already on his mind. Number 18, stand when she enters. A gentleman never stayed seated when a woman walked into a room. Beaumont Childress stood every time, in the barbershop, at the lodge hall, in the front room during a repast. If a woman walked through that door, he was on his feet before she reached the second step. Every man in the shop stood with him. It was not performance. It was how a room full of men told a woman she had been seen, and that her presence had changed the temperature of the room for the better. Number 17, carry what she carries. Percy Willingham took the grocery bag from a woman's arms the moment he saw her coming up the walk. The church program, the umbrella, the heavy plate covered in foil after the service. He reached for it before she could shift it to her other hand. He never asked. He never waited for permission. A woman walking beside Percy Willingham never carried anything heavier than her handbag, and she never had to say a word to make that happen. That kind of attention made a woman trust a man with everything else. Number 16, remove your hat. In a world where a black man's hat was one of the few things he owned that said something fine about him, taking it off indoors was not a small act. Harlan Tate pulled his Dobbs off at every threshold, every table, every introduction. His hat never touched his head inside a building. It told the room he respected the space he had entered and that he valued the people in it more than he valued looking sharp. A hat removed was a man saying, "I know where I am, and I'm glad to be here." Number 15, use both names. In a city where a grown black man could be called boy by a stranger half his age, Milton Everett called every person he met Mr. or Mrs. and their last name. Not because the world had extended him that courtesy, because he knew what it cost to be called less. A man who named you properly was a man who saw your full personhood, who understood that a name carried weight, carried history, carried someone's mother's hope for them. Milton Everett never let a soul feel unnamed in his presence, and people trusted him for it before they knew anything else about him. Number 14, answer with sir and ma'am. Dexter Poole used sir and ma'am with everyone he encountered. The grocer, the pastor, the white clerk at the hardware store, who never once returned the courtesy. It was not submission. It was declaration. A man who gave respect to people who withheld it from him was not bowing. He was announcing, with 2 quiet syllables, what kind of man he intended to be, regardless of what the world intended for him. Dexter Poole's manners were not for other people. They were for himself. Number 13. Never raise your voice. This sounds like the worst advice a young man could get today. Warren Coles never spoke above the volume of the room. Outside the Regal Ballroom one August night, a man twice his size got loud with him over nothing, a brushed shoulder, a misheard word. Warren dropped his voice lower, held his eyes level, said what he had to say as though volume was beneath him. The other man went quiet first. The crowd remembered it for years. The man who keeps his voice down in a room full of noise is the man the room starts listening to. Number 12. Keep your shoes clean. Every Sunday night, Alton Pryor sat on his back step with a tin of kiwi polish and a rag his grandmother had torn from an old undershirt. He worked the leather in slow circles until it held the porch light like a mirror. A man's shoes, he said, were the first thing people looked at and the last thing they remembered. A pair of clean shoes, on a man who had almost nothing else, told the world something that no words could. He had not given up on himself, and he did not intend to. There were rooms where all of this was taught. The barbershop where an old man looked at a boy's shoes and sent him home to polish them before he would cut his hair. The front porch where an uncle made a nephew practice a handshake, firm, not crushing, eyes level, until it came without thought. The deacon's side room after service, where a man who had carried himself through Jim Crow with his back unbowed, sat a younger man down and told him why it mattered. Those rooms are gone. The men who filled them are gone. And the boys who never got that hour, who never had a Clarence Pennington, pull them aside and say, "This is how you carry yourself, and this is why," have been guessing ever since. The code did not die. It just went quiet. Number 11. Guard her name. Everett Dabney let other men think what they liked rather than say one word about a woman he had walked home. Not to the fellows on the corner, not to his own cousin over a game of spades. In that era, a woman's good name was one of the few things she fully owned, and a man who kept it safe was a man she could trust with everything else she had. Everett Dabney never told, and the women who knew him never forgot that he was the kind of man who would not. Number 10. Settle your debts early. Randolph Sykes paid every debt before it came due. The grocer on Hunter Street, the man who patched his radiator, the neighbor who lent him a saw on a Saturday morning. Randolph had the money in their hand before they thought to ask for it. His credit was his name, and he kept it cleaner than his shoes. In a neighborhood where a man's word was the only collateral he would ever have, Randolph Sykes never let his word carry a balance. Number 9. Eat like you were raised. In a world that watched for any excuse to diminish a black man at the table, Curtis Haywood made his table a fortress. Elbows off the wood, napkin folded across the knee, mouth closed when he chewed. He did not eat quickly, and he did not eat carelessly, and he did not reach across another man's plate. A man who sat down to a meal with that kind of quiet discipline told every person at the table that he had been raised by someone who believed he was worth the teaching. Number 8. Arrive before you are expected. Louis Odom was already seated when the choir started, already standing at the shop floor when the foreman unlocked the gate, already on the church steps in his press suit 20 minutes before the first deacon opened the doors. His mother told him once, when he was 11, that a man who showed up late was a man telling every person in the room that his time mattered more than theirs. Louis Odom never told a room that. Not once in 62 years. Number 7. Discipline your appetites. Emmett Greer could sit in front of a bottle at the end of a long week and leave it full. He could let the easy money pass, the fast talk slide, the shortcut that would cost someone else something he was not willing to pay. What a man refused, he told his sons, said more about him than anything he ever reached for. A man people trusted with their money, their secrets, their daughters, was not the man who had the most. It was the man who needed the least and never pretended otherwise. Number 6. Correct every child. Nathaniel Broadnax stopped any child on the block who was heading wrong, not with a shout, not with a hand, but with a look and a word that carried the full weight of a man the whole street respected. Every child on that block was partly his to raise, and he took it as seriously as he took his own 2 sons. A neighborhood where grown men corrected every child was a neighborhood where every child knew, without being told, that somebody was watching and somebody cared whether they turned out right. Number 5. Keep your word once. James Virgil Colbert only had to say a thing one time. When he told a man he would be there, he was there. When he said a thing was true, you could build your week on it. A man only had to break his word once to lose what took him years and years to build. And James Virgil Colbert understood the mathematics of that better than anyone on his street. He never broke it, not to save face, not to save money, not once. Clarence Pennington learned every one of these things on the front steps of a shotgun house on Hilliard Street. He was 14 years old. His uncle Horace, a Pullman porter who had spent 30 years moving through white dining cars, with a posture so steady that passengers trusted him with their billfolds and their children, sat him down one evening in the last of the light and said something Clarence carried in his chest for the rest of his life. The code is not about impressing anybody, Horace told him. It is about deciding what kind of man you are going to be in a world that has already decided for you. Clarence Pennington never forgot that evening. Every rule on this list is a different expression of the decision his uncle asked him to make. Number 4. Defend without fists. Solomon Pratt could walk into a situation that was about to go wrong and turn it with nothing but his presence, not by backing down, by standing so still, speaking so steady, that the other man's anger had nothing to push against and nowhere to go. The man who could hold his ground without making a fist had mastered something that no amount of money or muscle could purchase. People trusted Solomon Pratt because they knew, without question, that he would never make a bad situation worse. Number 3. Keep your suffering to yourself. Thomas Leland Vance worked 2 jobs, buried a brother before he was 30, and raised 3 children in a house with 1 working radiator on the south side of Atlanta. Nobody on his block ever saw him break, not because he felt nothing, because he believed the people who depended on him deserved a man who could hold his own weight without making it theirs. That cost him something. It costs any man something. But the people who stood near Thomas Leland Vance stood near a man they never once had to worry about. And in a world full of worry, that was worth more than gold. Number 2. Teach without claiming it. Howard Sims passed the code to 3 nephews and never once sat them down and called it a lesson. He just tied his tie in front of them every Sunday morning. He just shook a man's hand in the vestibule while they watched from the pew. He just said good morning to the woman next door every single day of his life until the youngest nephew started doing it on his own without thinking about it. The code survived across generations, not because anyone wrote it down, but because men like Howard Sims lived it in plain sight, in front of boys who were paying close attention. Number 1. Speak to everybody. This is the plainest rule on this list, the simplest one, and it is the one Clarence Pennington lived by above every other. Clarence Pennington spoke to everybody, the woman sweeping her porch before dawn on Howell Street, the man he had never met waiting for the bus on Fair Street in the rain, the child selling penny candy on the corner who most grown men walked past without a glance. He said good morning. He tipped his hat. He looked a person in the eye and let them know, with 2 words, or with nothing more than a nod, that he had seen them and that they mattered. In a world that worked every single day to make black men invisible, that walked past them, looked through them, called them out of their names, erased them from the ledger, a man who spoke to everybody was a man who refused to let anyone else be invisible either. That is where trust began. not in the pressed trousers or the polished shoes or the firm handshake. Those things mattered, but they were branches. This was the root. Every rule on this countdown was a different way of doing this one thing, of telling another human being, with your body and your bearing and your discipline and your word, that they were real, that they were worth your time, and that you had decided to treat them that way, regardless of what the world had decided about you. None of it required money. None of it required a smooth tongue or fine clothes or a title after your name. It required a decision, made quietly, made early, made again every morning before the iron was hot, to carry yourself as though the people around you deserved your very best. And then to give it, without applause, without an audience, without asking for a single thing in return. The rooms have gone quiet. The men who filled them are gone. But the decision is still here. It was always here, and it is still available to any man willing to make it.